Scootaloo, get up! Get up! Now, hurry, Scootaloo! Wake up! Wake up!
Scootaloo shook her head, briefly wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back to her and she jumped to her feet. Aurora was shaking her, fright encasing her face. The suits were starting to approach the two now, tasers and shackles up at the ready.
Scootaloo, they're coming for us. What do we do?
Scootaloo looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked, except for one. On the scaffolding, the suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing, in order to prevent the fillies from freaking out. Fear was their tool. Scootaloo spun around, looking for an exit. There was only one, she realized.
I have a plan.
She whispered to Aurora.
What's that?
Clear, fly, fall, complete.
Aurora nodded in understanding, her eyes widening. She repeated, louder now, so the other, frightened fillies could hear her.
Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it.
1,
Scootaloo began counting.
2.
Aurora squeaked as she backed into Scootaloo. The suits were a mere few feet away now.
3.
A collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could fly took off. The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure of where to go. There was too much confusion. A few of the faster-thinking ones took off as well, tasers at the ready, aiming at the closest Pegasi that they could take.
Step 1,
Scootaloo screamed.
clear!
With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. Hooves connected with heads, and while some of the students fell, lifeless, to the floor, the majority of the casualties were the suited ponies. Scootaloo and Aurora landed on the scaffolding right by the door, and reached to open it. It was locked.
Oh, goodness. What do we do now?
Aurora cried.
We're still unclear.
She shouted, turning around and bucking the door. Aurora followed her, focusing the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be. Rainbow Dash, on the other side of the scaffolding, recovered from her initial shock of the rebellion, and noticed Scootaloo pounding on the door.
Kill her.
She screamed at the other important-looking ponies.
Kill her.
She started to gallop towards the fillies, forgetting her wings momentarily. Scootaloo closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It began to creak and splinter. Any second now, she thought. Rainbow Dash will get here. It's over. I'm doomed. She would have cried, but there were no more tears left. The door started to split from its frame, leaning inward. It wouldn't be long until it was open. She opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding. All of the remaining ponies were there, pressing together, holding back the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies. They wouldn't last long, however. Even as Scootaloo watched, twitching and yelping ponies were falling to the floor below, some even landing in the great maw of the Spectra machine. The pink pony from Levitating Acres was there, and she turned to Scootaloo and Aurora just as the door blew back into the hall.
Fly!
The pink pony demanded with pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but was cut short as the pile of Pegasus blew apart, with Rainbow Dash standing enraged in the opening. She was on her back hooves now, the front two rolling in the air. A small gash down her side leaked red, and her multicolored mane was torn in a patch. An unearthly howl passed her lips, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that had been left.
Come on, Aurora!
Scootaloo pleaded as she spun around.
We've got to fly if we're going to live.
I can't. This is too much. I haven't healed.
Aurora looked at Scootaloo with wide, open eyes.
You go, Scootaloo. Tell everyone what happens here. Let them know.
She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now, as Rainbow Dash's bloodlust tore them to pieces. Her blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping, as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more. Cloudsdale could take a small shortage of rainbows. In another few months, there would be more classes, more failures. But for now, all she knew was that Scootaloo had to die, violently if possible. Decades of working for the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. She was the only one allowed out in public, and keeping the horrible secret within her since childhood had only led to psychological problems that no amount of therapy could cure. Scootaloo was her last link on sanity, and her failure had destroyed that. There was no logic in her mind anymore. No care. No capacity for compassion. Only hate. Pure, concentrated, and evil hate filled the gap her love for Scootaloo had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more. Only this monster remained.
I hardly knew you, Aurora.
Scootaloo cooed softly to the yellow Pegasus beside her.
I'm sorry we had to meet like this, and I'm sorry we have to part like this.
She sniffed. She had found more tears.
Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting.
Aurora reassured Scootaloo.
Now, you heard the other pony. Fly, Scootaloo. Fly. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Aurora.
With that, Scootaloo levitated and spun around, looking into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and then launched down the cramped corridor. She had no idea where she was going, but any chance at freedom was one that she had to take. Aurora blinked a couple of times, standing in front of the door. Rainbow Dash would have at least one more obstacle in her way to Scootaloo. The blue pony tossed the last of the other students over the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora.
How cute. You think that you, a useless, broken pile of manure, could possibly stand in my way? You make me laugh. None of you can compete with the awesome power I have.
Love can overcome all evils in this world.
Aurora straightened herself in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Rainbow Dash, barring her entry down the corridor beyond.
Well then, brat. Let's see if love will overcome this one.
And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and pulled, tearing it off of her completely. Aurora collapsed onto her knees, grinding her teeth in horrible pain. But she did not scream. She wouldn't give in to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash grabbed her other wing and dragged her, kicking and moaning, down to the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the wing, laughing quietly to herself as the look of intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her over the top of the machine. With a squeak of evil laughter, she jerked at the wing in her hoof, and it, too, disconnected from the now convulsing Pegasus. And Aurora fell. She landed head first. The door on the scaffolding closed with a gust of wind, just as the machine began pumping out the brightest greens and yellows that it had ever produced. And no one was around to see it. Scootaloo glanced backwards momentarily, her heart pounding. The noise of the constant thump, thump, thump drowned out any other sound in her head. Her ears were throbbing along with it. The corridor was just like the one that led to the theater room, cramped with dozens of obstacles jutting out at random intervals. Straight behind her, maybe 500 meters now, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along. Both Pegasus were completely straight, hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count. One trying to escape, the other to capture. Scootaloo looked forward again, focusing on what lay ahead. That's all that matters, she thought. What's ahead of me? There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus. For the second time in as many days, a flood of instinct overtook Scootaloo. And despite the terror that she felt in her body, the sorrow that had surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries melted away, and the thought of flying encased her very being. Down under wires and pipes she ducked, up and around various workers whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as the raging pony behind collided with them. Her body doing the flying, Scootaloo's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at impossible speeds, zipped up and down countless sets of stairs, trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She contemplated every nook and cranny that she passed, briefly considering hiding. She struck that idea down. As insane as Rainbow Dash may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spot that Scootaloo may be. But there, ahead of her, Scootaloo found a solution. A garbage vent of some sort, sticking out from the wall to the floor below. Momentarily, she gave thought to where it may lead. Whether out of the factory or into some incinerator, she couldn't tell. But it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance behind her to make sure that the unstable mare was far enough away. Rainbow Dash was paying no attention to any hazard as she sought her prey, tearing through electrical wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time. But the collisions had slowed her down enough to give Scootaloo a chance. She slammed to a halt over the open vent, hoping for her life.
Fall.
She muttered, closing her eyes and wings, resisting the urge to start flapping immediately. She counted silently to herself as shadows rushed past her, hoping for the best of where this vent led. 1, 2, 3. Scootaloo opened her eyes and wings and looked up, hovering. Rainbow Dash was above, looking down into the vent. Her eyes were buggy and twitching. Her hooves pounded on the edge of the vent. She was too large to follow, the filly having barely made it in herself. But then, the anger in her face vanished, only to be replaced by a malicious grin. She started laughing again, the cackle echoing down the vent and reverberating inside Scootaloo's mind.
You moron. You never did have a good sense of direction.
She teased, laughing again. Scootaloo finally looked down. Around her,
Oh no!
she squealed. She was in the theater room again. Only, by now, it was full of suited ponies, circling her. Their masked faces seemed to be grinning at her as Rainbow Dash shouted orders down the vent.
Don't let her die. I must do it. Subdue her. Catch her.
She whinnied in glorious victory as the suits shocked Scootaloo with a taser, and as her limp body began to fall from the air, caught her and brought her to the floor. Scootaloo blacked out momentarily as the electricity passed through her. But she came to, lying on the cold cloud floor, metal shackles preventing her from moving. She struggled to get free. She could hardly shake. The chains lifted her slightly, bringing her small body eye to eye with a Pegasus in front of her. The pony was a deep blood red, glistening in the artificial light of the factory. Her mane had small spots of glorious colors of the rainbow, but it was mostly the same red color as her coat of fur. Chunks of skin were missing from some small spots, and her hair was ripped in some places. Bald patches of skin in others. The only clue that Scootaloo had as to who this used to be were the rose irises that were focused on her.
Any final words, you miserable, worthless whore of a foal?
Scootaloo brought her chin up high, still demanding even the tiniest fraction of dignity.
You have beautiful eyes.
She cooed, softly yet clearly.